The scent of fresh paint was still sweet in the air, a promise of new beginnings. My name is Clara, and just a week ago, my husband, David, and I had moved into our dream home. A charming bungalow with a sprawling backyard, perfect for the rose garden I'd always envisioned. This house wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was the culmination of years of hard work, of my late grandmother's legacy, a quiet inheritance that made this dream possible. I remember signing the closing papers, a sense of profound peace washing over me, believing I was finally building something permanent, something truly ours. Then the call came, an unfamiliar number, just as I was unpacking a box of delicate crystal glasses. I almost let it go to voicemail, but a flicker of intuition made me answer. "Mrs. Hayes, this is Mr. Henderson. I sold you the house." My heart gave a strange lurch. Mr. Henderson, a kind elderly man who had lived in this house for decades, his hands trembling slightly when he'd handed over the keys. "Mr. Henderson, is everything all right?" I asked, my voice betraying a nervousness I couldn't quite place. There was a long pause, heavy with unspoken words. "I need to apologize," he finally said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "When I installed the smart home system years ago, I put a security camera in the living room. I thought I'd disconnected them all before the sale, but I missed one. It's still linked to my old cloud account. I only noticed because I got a notification a few days ago, and I went to delete the footage, and, well, I think you need to see this yourself." My stomach tightened, a cold knot forming. "See what?" I pressed, my voice barely audible. "I'd rather not say over the phone. I've saved everything to a drive. Please, come see me. Alone. Don't say anything to your husband yet." His voice dropped, a note of urgency, almost a plea. "Please, Clara, come alone." I agreed, my hand shaking as I hung up the phone. I looked into the living room, where David was laughing with his mother, Eleanor, as they arranged a large framed print. Eleanor, with her perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a smile that never quite reached her eyes, had been a constant presence since we moved in, offering unsolicited advice on everything from curtain choices to paint colors. David, ever the dutiful son, listened intently, nodding along. They looked so innocent, so happy, and yet, Mr. Henderson's words echoed in my mind, a discordant note in the symphony of our new life. "Everything okay, honey?" David asked, catching my eye. "You look a little pale." "Just tired," I lied, the words slipping out with surprising ease. "I think I'm going to run out for a bit. Forgot we needed more paint for the study." Eleanor's gaze lingered on me, a half-second too long, a familiar, unsettling scrutiny. "Take your time, dear," she said, her voice saccharine sweet. "We'll manage here." I grabbed my keys, my purse, and walked out, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. In the car, I tried to rationalize it, to dismiss it as a misunderstanding. Maybe Mr. Henderson had seen something innocuous, something easily explained, but a deeper, darker part of me already knew. It was the same intuition that had whispered to me about David's evasiveness when I'd asked about the mortgage details, the way Eleanor had insisted on being present for every major decision, the subtle shift in their dynamic whenever I brought up my grandmother's inheritance. This house, built on my family's legacy, felt like it was slowly, subtly, being claimed by theirs. Mr. Henderson's new apartment was small, meticulously tidy, a testament to a life lived with careful precision. He opened the door before I even knocked, his face etched with a grave concern that extinguished any lingering hope of a simple misunderstanding. "Thank you for coming," he said, leading me to a small kitchen table where a laptop sat open, its screen dark. "I wasn't sure you would." "You made it sound important," I replied, my voice hoarse. "It is." He gestured for me to sit. My hands were cold, clammy, and I clasped them tightly in my lap to hide their tremor. He sat opposite me, his movements slow and deliberate. "I want you to understand something first," he began. "I'm not a man who meddles. I installed that camera system for my late wife's peace of mind. I truly believed I'd removed them all. But I missed one, hidden behind the bookshelf in the living room. It's wired into an outlet I'd forgotten about. My cloud storage sent a notification. It was full. When I went to delete the footage, I couldn't in good conscience delete it without showing you first." "Show me," I urged, the suspense unbearable. He turned the laptop towards me and pressed play. The timestamp read 4 days prior, a Tuesday afternoon when I'd been at work. The camera's elevated angle offered a wide view of my living room, still half furnished, boxes stacked against one wall. I watched as David let himself in, followed a moment later by Eleanor. She looked around, her eyes sweeping over the room with an air of proprietary assessment, as if she were already picturing it as her own. Then, David pulled a thick manila envelope from his jacket and handed it to Eleanor. She opened it, her expression unreadable, and then a slow, knowing smile spread across her face. She pulled out a document, unfolded it, and began to read. David leaned over her shoulder, pointing to specific sections. Their heads were close, their voices too low for the microphone to pick up, but their body language spoke volumes. There was an intimacy, a conspiratorial air that sent a chill down my spine. Eleanor tapped a finger on a particular paragraph. David nodded, then took the pen she offered and signed his name with a flourish. They exchanged a look, a silent agreement passing between them. Then, Eleanor pulled out another document, smaller this time, and David signed that too. They put everything back in the envelope, and Eleanor tucked it into her alligator skin purse. The video ended. The silence in the room was deafening. I stared at the dark screen, my mind reeling. What was that? I finally managed to whisper, my voice barely a thread. Mr. Henderson looked at me, his kind eyes filled with sorrow. I don't know the specifics, Mrs. Hayes, but the way they were, the secrecy, it didn't feel right, especially after what I overheard later that evening. He paused, taking a deep breath. My system also records audio, though it's not always clear. I heard them talking about the house and the inheritance. Eleanor mentioned something about securing their future, and David said, "Clara trusts me. She won't read the fine print." The world tilted. He won't read the fine print. The words echoed in my head, a hammer blow to my carefully constructed reality. My husband, the man I loved, the man I trusted implicitly, was planning something behind my back, something involving my house, my inheritance, and his mother, the woman who had always subtly undermined me, was his accomplice. I left Mr. Henderson's apartment in a daze, the USB drive clutched in my hand. The drive, a small, innocuous object, now held the shattering truth of my marriage. I drove home, the familiar streets blurring past, my mind a maelstrom of confusion and betrayal. When I walked through my front door, David and Eleanor were still in the living room, now admiring the framed print. They looked up, their smiles easy, unburdened. The sight of them, so seemingly innocent, twisted a knife in my gut. "Everything okay, Clara?" David asked, his voice warm, concerned. I forced a smile, a brittle mask I barely recognized. "Perfect," I said, the lie tasting like ash. "Just needed some air." That night, sleep was impossible. I lay awake, the image of David and Eleanor, heads bent in conspiracy, replaying in my mind. I knew I couldn't confront them without proof, without understanding the full extent of their deception. I needed a plan. The next morning I called a lawyer, Michael Vance, whose name I'd found through a discreet online search. His office was small, unassuming, tucked away above a quiet street. He was a man in his late 50s, with kind, tired eyes that seemed to have seen every variation of human deceit. I laid everything out on his desk, the USB drive, photos of the documents David had signed, my own notes from Mr. Henderson's account. He watched the video in silence, his expression unreadable, occasionally jotting notes on a legal pad. When it finished, he leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "Mrs. Hayes," he began, "I'm going to be direct. This is not a simple matter. The documents your husband signed, based on what Mr. Henderson described, sound like a power of attorney clause within a refinance agreement. If signed and notarized, it would grant your husband significant authority over the property. Not immediate total control, but enough to, over time, transfer ownership, take out loans against the equity, or even sell the house, all without your active consent." My hands clenched in my lap. "So, it's legal?" "On its face, yes. That's what makes it so insidious. There's nothing illegal about a spouse asking another spouse to sign paperwork. The law generally assumes you understand what you're signing. Your only real protection is not signing it, and ensuring they can't force the issue another way." "Can they?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Not if we act quickly," he said, tapping his pen. "I can file protective measures today. a notice of interest, updated deed language, and a formal record establishing you as the sole party with authority to approve any transfer or encumbrance on the property. This won't stop them from asking you to sign anything, but it will mean that even if you did sign under pressure, any transfer would require your personal, verified appearance and separate legal counsel review before it could be finalized. In plain terms, I'm building a wall around your house that only you can open. A wave of relief washed over me, so sudden it almost made me dizzy, but beneath it, a cold resolve hardened. I want more than a wall, Mr. Vance, I said, my voice firm. I want them to understand exactly what they tried to do. I want it documented. I want it undeniable. He studied me for a moment, and a flicker of respect entered his tired eyes. Then we proceed carefully. You continue exactly as you have been. Don't refuse to sign. Don't confront them. Let them believe they're close to finishing what they started. The more comfortable they become, the more they'll say, and the more they say, the stronger your position becomes. In the meantime, I'll file everything necessary to ensure that no matter what happens at that table, nothing actually transfers without going through me first. I left his office that afternoon with a stack of documents, carbon copies of every filing he'd promised to submit. I drove home, rehearsing the role I needed to play, the trusting wife, slowly, sweetly coming around to signing away a life that was now legally armored against them. It worked better than I expected. Within days, David's cautious demeanor had vanished, replaced by an easy confidence. The tightness around his jaw, which I'd noticed during our brief conversations about the refinance paperwork, was gone. He started talking openly about his plans for the home office in the basement, a space he'd always wanted. Eleanor, sensing victory, began arriving with paint swatches and furniture catalogs, holding them against my walls with the proprietary air of a woman decorating a house she already considered hers. I watched them, building their house of cards, one relaxed conversation at a time, and I said nothing. On a Thursday evening, Eleanor casually mentioned a notary who could come to the house directly. So much easier than driving somewhere, dear, especially with how busy you've been. I let a beat of hesitation pass, a subtle nod to the reluctance I was supposed to be overcoming, then smiled. Monday, I said. Let's do Monday. I'll have the whole weekend to feel settled about it. Eleanor's face lit up with undisguised triumph. David reached over and squeezed my hand, a gesture I allowed, returning his smile with an ease that would have terrified me a week earlier. I understood now, watching his relieved, satisfied face, that I was no longer the woman standing in the way of his plan. I was the woman closing the trap around it. The days leading up to Monday stretched thin, taut with a tension only I seemed to feel. In the house, everything felt normal, yet every glance, every casual remark, was imbued with a sinister undertone. I continued to play my part, the sweet, slightly hesitant wife, while secretly preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Monday arrived, bright and deceptively ordinary. The notary, a young woman with a polite, professional air, arrived promptly at 10 a.m. David and Eleanor were already seated at the dining room table, the refinance documents spread out before them. Eleanor had even brought a small bouquet of white lilies, a bizarre touch of domesticity to what was essentially a betrayal. "Good morning, Clara," David said, his smile wide. "Ready to get this done?" I took my seat, my heart humming. "Ready," I said, my voice steady. The notary began to explain the documents, a routine recitation of clauses and legal jargon. David kept glancing at me, a subtle pressure in his gaze, urging me to sign. Eleanor watched me with a predatory gleam in her eyes. When the notary finally pushed the pen across the table, indicating where I should sign, I paused. "Before I sign," I said, my voice clear and calm, "I have a few questions." David's smile faltered. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Clara, dear, we've been over this," Eleanor began, her voice edged with impatience. "Not quite," I interrupted, maintaining eye contact with the notary. "Could you please explain, in plain language, the implications of the power of attorney clause on page 14? The notary, momentarily flustered, looked at David, then back at me. She began to explain, her words careful, precise. As she spoke, the color drained from David's face. Eleanor's jaw tightened. "And this clause," I continued, pointing to another section, which grants my husband sole authority to make decisions regarding the property, including its sale or encumbrance, without my explicit consent. Once this document is notarized? The notary confirmed it, her voice now tinged with unease. David pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly. "Clara, what is this?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "This," I said, looking directly at him, "is me finally reading the fine print." I pulled out my phone and pressed play. Mr. Henderson's recording filled the silence. David's voice, clear and unmistakable. "Clara trusts me. She won't read the fine print." The air in the room became thick with tension. Eleanor let out a small gasp. David stared at me, his face a mask of shock and fury. You recorded me?" "No," I said, my voice unwavering. "Mr. Henderson's hidden camera did. The one you and your mother thought was disconnected." I then played another clip, Eleanor's voice, cold and calculating. "We need to secure our future, David. This house is the key." Eleanor rose from her chair, her face a mask of outrage. "This is an outrage, a complete fabrication." "Is it?" I asked, my gaze sweeping between them. "Because I also have the video footage of you both signing those documents, discussing how to use my trust correctly. Would you like to see it again?" The notary, looking increasingly uncomfortable, cleared her throat. "Mrs. Hayes, if you have concerns about the nature of these documents, I cannot proceed with notarization." "I have more than concerns," I said, pushing the documents back across the table. "I have evidence of attempted fraud and manipulation, and I have a lawyer who has already filed protective measures to ensure that this house, my house, remains solely mine." At that moment, Michael Vance stepped into the dining room, followed by a court officer. He nodded to me, then addressed David and Eleanor. "Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, my client, Clara Hayes, has provided substantial evidence of your attempts to unlawfully gain control of her property. All proposed transfers of authority have been formally blocked. Any further attempts will result in legal action." David's face crumpled, a mixture of anger and a strange, hollow grief. Eleanor, however, remained defiant. "You'll regret this, Clara," she hissed, her voice stripped of its earlier warmth. "Family is family. You'll learn that the hard way, alone in this house." "I already have a family," I replied, my voice steady. "The one my grandmother built for me, and this house is part of what she left me, not something I'm willing to hand over to protect people who were never protecting me back." They left within the hour. David packed 2 suitcases in silence, moving through the bedroom we'd shared for barely 2 weeks with the stiff, careful motions of a man trying to preserve some final shred of composure. Eleanor waited by the front door, arms crossed, refusing to look at me. The door closed behind them both, the quiet, final click echoing through the now empty house. I stood alone in the front hallway for a long time, listening to the house settle around me. I walked slowly through each room, as if seeing it for the first time, though nothing had physically changed. The same hardwood floors my grandmother would have admired, the same kitchen window that caught the morning light exactly as I'd imagined, the same living room where a small, hidden camera behind a bookshelf had quietly, faithfully told the truth when no one else would. It didn't feel like the house had changed. It felt like I finally understood what had been true about it all along, that it was mine, fully and completely, in a way it had never quite felt before that phone call, before that video, before I learned exactly what I was capable of when everything I loved was threatened. I called Mr. Henderson the next morning, mostly to thank him again, though I think what I really wanted was simply to hear a kind voice after everything. He was quiet for a moment when I told him how it had ended, and then he said something I've carried with me since. "Houses hold on to the truth longer than people do. Mrs. Hayes, I'm just glad this one still had a little truth left to give you. I think about that often now. In the months since, how close I came to signing away everything my grandmother worked her whole life to give me, simply because I trusted the wrong smile at the wrong table. I think about how love, real love, doesn't need to be protected through secrecy, through paperwork slipped quietly past someone who trusts you too much to read the fine print. I think about how the truest kind of partnership is built in the open, not behind a mother-in-law's carefully arranged furniture catalogs or a husband's practiced reassurances. This story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.